Greetings, warriors. Welcome to another episode of Chevrons, a podcast for the enlisted force. I'm Tim Sandlin from the 102nd Intelligence Wing Public Affairs Office. Today's topic is emotional intelligence, and to tell us all about EI and EQ is our resident expert and all-around great airman, Chaplain Lieutenant Colonel Ryan Yee. Thanks for coming on the program, sir. How you doing today?
Feeling good. Waking up. Feeling strong.
Great. So I attended this year's TIME conference, a great coming together of mid-level NCOs, primarily tech sergeants, that's put on by the Massachusetts Air National Guard. And while there, I found myself in a familiar place. It was the second time that I got to witness your presentation on emotional intelligence, a topic I wouldn't think would be interesting and riveting, but nonetheless, on my second time attending, it was even more engaging than the first time. And I thought, there's a sign here. I need to get you on the Chevrons podcast so that we can share this great information with the masses. So with that said, the first thing I want to ask you has nothing to do with the topic, but more about you. Can you tell me about yourself and what's your story, sir?
Sure. Let's see. I've been in for 16 years, mostly reserve and guard duty as a chaplain. And yeah, but I originally grew up in Ohio, so I'm a big Cleveland guy, depressed sports fan, always. The Cleveland Guardians are terrible this year, but and
I know you didn't mention the Browns, though.
Yeah, well, they're gonna depress me regardless. It's a assumption that will happen, you know, when you're hopeful, but then you're like, oh man, it's the Browns again. But but yeah, no, my family is from South Korea. You know, they immigrated in the late 70s. And so they came here to live the American dream, and my dad was a big believer in the opportunity of America and to work hard. And so he brought my mom here. My brothers and I were born here. I'm the oldest of three boys. And, but eventually I made myself way to Boston after college. I was up at Dartmouth College in New Hampshire. I came down to go to seminary, and I decided to stay in Boston ever since. So I was a pastor at a church for a number of years, and then I worked at Brigham and Women's Hospital for a year as a hospital chaplain. That was kind of mind-blowing. And then the last 4 years, before I came to the 102nd, I was working as a chaplain at Harvard Business School, which is, again, a very unique group of people to work with. And so for the past 9 months, I've been deployed in garrison at the 102nd, and really enjoy it, love it, here for another year, and hopefully continuing on for many years to come. And I'm married for about 11 years, and I have a little dog named Zoe. So that's a little bit about me.
Fantastic, sir. Thank you. So moving on to the topic at hand here, what can you tell me about emotional intelligence? Where do we start in understanding this concept?
Wow. Yeah, I think, as a chaplain, a lot of people can, just don't know what to do with us sometimes, If you're religious, then it's like, oh, okay, makes sense. If you're not, or maybe you don't want to be religious anymore, you're just like, I don't know what to do with this person, or I'll avoid them, And I totally understand that as well. I grew up in the church, and I wasn't a huge fan of it, and then kind of found my journey with God a little later on in life. But I think, why emotional intelligence, I think, is become important for me as a person, but also as a chaplain, is that, as chaplains, we obviously have a religious lane. A spiritual lane, though, is becoming more and more important. Spirituality, as I shared at the TIME conference, is a bigger concept, right?
Sure.
Like just like being a human being or your physical part of who you are. That's kind of more of a general, kind of all-encompassing thing. And I think spirituality, I think everyone actually is spiritual, whether they believe in God or not, it doesn't matter. Spirituality has to do with meaning and purpose and identity, and these are things that I think in our society we are struggling through, actually. Statistics show that we're more and more lonely as a country, probably the loneliest country in the world, even though we're the wealthiest and most powerful, and we're more and more disconnected from each other. There was a statistic I read that 40% of people say they don't have any meaningful relationships, which blows my mind, but also doesn't surprise me as we kind of think social media relationships fulfill real relationships, which we know they don't. And so,
I'm sure the pandemic didn't help that,
Oh, yeah. No, totally. No, you're right.
A few years of being disconnected physically, more than ever.
Oh, yeah. Especially my wife's a teacher, and seeing the ramifications for little ones and their hardships of connecting with people and being alone was definitely clear, especially when they came back and trying to readjust.
Right.
So in this all-encompassing world of spirituality, one of my hopes and desires is for airmen and their families to be in my view, the best versions of who they want to be, you know? And I think everyone always has this ideal version of who they should be or they want to be, but oftentimes we fail at that. And so the question is, how do we get there, right? And I think one of the ways I've found through research, through data, which I think is important, you know, again, I'm a man of faith, but I think data and research is important. And one of the ways we kind of close the gap between where we're at and who we want to be is through emotional intelligence, actually, you know, and the research has shown in the last 3 decades how critical it is for human improvement, happiness, to relationship success. And, you know, it's really still a relatively new idea in the military, in our culture even. It's a huge thing in the business world. Again, I said I was at HBS, and they did a podcast recently at the Harvard Business Review, and emotional intelligence was one of the 4 most important business ideas in the last 25 years. And so it's ingrained in there. The top companies, Fortune 500, utilize it all the time, and we haven't even really touched it in the military. And I think we're missing out if we also say people are our most important commodity in the military. So that's kind of what's led me to kind of invest more into this, because I think it impacts all of us, whether you're religious or not. So,
Right.
Yeah.
So, what is the basis for emotional intelligence when we talk about that as a concept? That usually how we break it down, there's steps or there's aspects of things, puzzle pieces that kind of bring it all together. What is emotional intelligence, if there were, you know, pieces, if you could break it down?
Yeah, totally. I mean, emotional intelligence, I guess I should have said it earlier, is just the ability, the intelligence, the skill set to understand your emotions, to manage your emotions, and then to influence others' emotions as well. And so, and doing that, you're able to bring actually what you want for yourself, what you might want in your relationship. This is a huge tool that can be powerful. And when you say it's really composed of 4 main big ideas, and that is emotional intelligence is composed of, first, self-awareness, the idea that, hey, what am I feeling? What's going on inside of me? Self-awareness, right? The second is, okay, now I know self-awareness. How do I manage these emotions? Okay, I'm angry. Now, what do I do about it? You know, should I throw a lamp across the room? Probably not, you know, but sometimes we react in ways that we don't even think. Oftentimes when we're feeling stressed or scared or angry, our emotions take over, the rational part of our brain shuts off, and we do things that maybe we learned as a child, and we do things we don't really want to do, you know? And so that leads to self-management, right? So the self-awareness is one part of emotional intelligence. The second part is self-management and how we manage our own emotions.
Kind of like self-control.
I mean, that's one thing. Yeah.
You know, maybe that's not the right way. And kind of based on past experience of, you know, that didn't work last time, I've got to react differently this time.
And that's the hope, right? And that requires, again, another feedback loop of self-awareness, being like, okay, the problem is that we continue to do the same things we don't want to do and don't do anything to change it. And that's what definition of insanity, right? You're hoping something else will happen. Because it's true that it's hard work. And the emotional intelligence is hard work. I mean, but the nice thing is, and why I care about it, is that it's work that you can actually change. It's things that you can increase your emotional quotient, we call it. You can't, as I shared in the time comp, you can't actually increase your intelligent quotient. You can get smarter and know more things, but you can't increase your emotional intelligent quotient. You can increase your emotional intelligence, and that's something I would argue, if we think about all the time and money and effort we put into things, I would say that's probably one of the most bang for the buck things you can do. But it's hard because you have to deal with things you don't want to deal with. For example, your anxiety, your fears. And so, yeah, I think you're right on with that. So that's 2 parts of it, self-awareness, self-management. Then that leads to social awareness, right? That's the third part. Like, what's going on around me? Quote unquote, what's going on in the room, you know? Even as I talk to you, you know, what's Tim kind of emoting, you know? I need to be aware of that as in emotional intelligence.
Reading the room,
exactly.
Yeah.
And that's really important, right? Because you can think you're awesome and you know what you're doing on your own capacity, but to understand other people's, you know, emotions in a room or in a meeting, I think is critical as well, or in your family room or in a dinner table, right?
Yeah.
Things like that. And that then leads to relationship management, right? Now that you kind of hopefully know a little bit more through communication, through intuition, okay, how do I influence and manage this relationship. What do I need to say? What do I need to do? What do we need to do? And so those are 4 big parts of kind of emotional intelligence. And I think those 4 are, again, hard to work on. Some areas you'll be better at than others. But again, the key and the good news is that all these things you can get better on.
So one of the buzzwords that I hear thrown around in at least, I don't want to say buzzwords, but one of the philosophies that I think has been renewed a little bit, and it's kind of an ancient philosophy, is Stoicism. And I hear Stoicism thrown around a lot these days in the enlisted force. It's a lot a concept that a lot of the senior enlisted leadership in the Air Force has been using, and I think it's great. Sounds very similar. It's being aware of where you are and being aware of your emotions. And is there any correlation to emotional intelligence and Stoicism? It seems like they're kind of related concepts.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting you bring that actually up, Tim, because I haven't really heard about that till I came on full time. Again, this is my first year being full time in the military ever. So, and so a couple of people were talking about Stoicism. A lot of sounds like influence from some kind of like those podcast type of special operator type people. And I actually had someone after the time conference say like, hey, like I'm kind of like enjoying Stoicism, the philosophy of Stoicism, but then like how does that fit in with emotional intelligence? Because he was seeing it as actually opposites, right? Because Stoicism is more, I guess his definition was like, it's all rational and, you kind of detach from your emotions, but then what do you do about being emotional intelligent and seeing how important it is and how proven the data shows it influences your success in the work and in your family and friendships. So, again, I wouldn't say I'm an expert on Stoicism, but what I know of it, I think I was telling him that the importance about emotional intelligence is that it's not about being emotional, right? You can be very emotional, you can be very tied into your emotions, but not be very intelligent about your emotions, right?
Right. How do you use them? And
how do you utilize them? And what's going on underneath?
It's probably like anything else, any other skill, you've got to exercise it to get good at it.
100%. And that's what I was telling this airman, that where I see the overlap between Stoicism and emotional intelligence is that I believe your emotions are so critical. I was sharing the time conference. Your emotions, again, I grew up in a Korean family. Again, if you grew up, I think everyone, human history, again, has dealt with, physical needs and trying to survive, past generations. Again, we're in a very blessed time where the poverty levels have gone down huge amounts in the last 50 years. Anyways, that means that that the struggles that our families are dealing with or we're dealing with is less about how much food we have on the table and more with kind of understanding and the importance of emotions, actually, because I think emotions represent what's going on underneath. So I grew up in a Korean family. It's just like, and my dad grew up dirt poor in Korea, and so for him, like emotions, like I don't got time for emotions, right? I got to put food on the table, right? Well, we got time for emotions now, but then what do you do when you never learn from your family, your parents, how to deal with your emotions, right? Most people shut them down. Most people medicate emotions, good or bad. And so I think why emotions are so important is because they reveal deep truths that you're experiencing, realities, and even core beliefs underneath, And so when we ignore our emotions, it's to our detriment. We're not listening to authentically what's going on, who we are actually. And so that's why, going back to your original question, is I think the overlap is being aware that emotions are critical about who you are as a human being. And Stoicism in the analysis, in the kind of, I guess, being stoic about what is going on. I was telling the same, I want you to analyze with all your abilities and authenticity, what are you feeling, why are you feeling, and what are you going to do about it? So applying Stoicism to emotional intelligence, I think there's the overlap. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I had no idea either. So I'm just, I hear both concepts talked about a lot, and I think they're both important. And whatever side of the fence, blend the two.
Right.
If that works for you. So in terms of controlling your emotions and using it as a skill, or learning the skill of managing your own emotions, why does this all matter? What's the, what do you get out of this ultimately?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I don't know anyone who lives their life to be more unhappy, and to be more miserable. Some people might have like given up, but that's not what they ultimately hope and want. And so, I mean, I really, again, believe that there are a number of things that really can bring a lot of joy and success. Like, one of my other presentations I do is about the art of happiness, and it's about the science and research on happiness and how people are truly happy.
Right.
And there's really four big components. I won't go into detail, but one of them is about your relationship with family, your relationship with friendships, having meaningful work, and the last one is having a worldview, whether it's religious or not. Those four components really influence your true happiness. And so I think why emotional intelligence is so important is because it's actually something. Because I think everyone wants to be happy, but sometimes and more successful, but like we don't know exactly sometimes how to do it, and don't have anyone guiding us, and not sure who to trust. Right? I think we live in a culture now that's less about what's truthful, but it's more about who you trust, and from there you'll kind of accept what's true. And I think that why emotional intelligence is key is because I think that's one of the few things I've found that has been trustworthy. Where that if you invest in A and you do this and apply it, like the result will be good things, Like there's not many things in my view that you can say, like, if you do this and follow it as best as you can, that this will produce good things, And I think emotional intelligence, to me, is one of those low-hanging fruits in our lives that we're like, hey, like, okay, like you can try to win the lottery or get a doctorate degree or something. That's kind of harder versus like, hey, like maybe if you spend some time doing emotional, like I said in the time conference, like every night, like just writing down your emotions. How did you feel during that day? Like that investment in time is both low and can be so impactful for your relationships and for your own self awareness and your healing, And so I just feel like for bang for the buck and for what the data has shown, emotional intelligence is just so critical for success, personal as well as professional success. So.
Well, especially too in the eyes of your contemporaries and your family members, and he really has it together. He never gets rattled when the stuff hits the fan. He keeps it together, and people look up to that kind of skill or look up to that kind of quality.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's right.
In the corporate world, you mentioned it was one of the four top factors.
Right, top business ideas in the last four. Yeah.
Why do you think that is? I mean, corporations and companies and.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think most of, last, 200 years, or I guess last really with the advent of the Enlightenment and the importance of knowledge and intelligence, people thought, hey, like, to be successful, it's all about how smart you are, right? I mean, a lot of us think that even now, right? Like, how smart you are, what degree you got necessarily equates to your success, right? And they found, again, about 30 years ago, as they started doing research, that wasn't the case. Okay, yeah, it helps that you're smart, right? Like, that always helps, right? Or you're competent, right? But there became more awareness that that was just one part of your success. The bigger part was, again, how you work with people, how you manage what you're feeling. And, I gave the example about Robert Oppenheimer, right? Malcolm Gladwell, great author, wrote a book called Outliers about all these amazing people who are outliers of success. He has some really interesting ideas. One of them is like, and I'm not sure how much I believe in it, but the idea is like if you do 10,000 hours on something, you'll be an expert, whether it's piano or whatever. That's kind of the magic number. Anyways, in one of his chapters, he talks about Robert Oppenheimer, the creator of the atomic bomb, father of the atomic bomb. And again, he's a genius, but he gathered all these people, other geniuses, to work on this brand new technology that, if you watch the movie Oppenheimer, they were afraid that if they did this, it might actually destroy the world, right? It might just light the atmosphere on fire and everyone would die from that atomic bomb, And so his skill in the book and in general wasn't just his intelligence, which is extremely high, but really his emotional intelligence in gathering people, convincing all these scientists to move to New Mexico, of all places, and then managing the relationships between the teams, the people, the big egos, as well as managing the military brass who wanted the atomic bomb now. They spent $2 billion, back in the 40s for that, And so he was managing all these things, managing his own emotions, his marriage, what he was feeling, the stress, all these factors. If you think about it, yeah, okay, he's a really smart guy, but this success? Was it really just how smart he was? Like, there were smarter guys there, definitely, but really, again, his emotional intelligence, which he kind of learned a lot in the book from Malcolm Gladwell. He learned a lot from his mother about the importance of emotional intelligence, and that was one of the reasons he was chosen to be the lead on this whole project, because of his ability to work with people and lead a team. So yeah, that's why I think that's really a good example of how businesses are seeing. Again, even thinking about your own life. You've been in the military for a while, and I've been for a little bit. I know you're retired, and think about the best moments and the times of success. Even here in the PA office, working with people who just get it and work with you and are teachable and want to work with you, versus those who are emotionally unintelligent, right? They don't know what they're feeling. They're dealing with lots of stress at home, and they don't know how to manage it. It just, all that stuff comes in here, and you wish you could separate them, but you can't. We're human beings. We're all composed of all these factors, and so yeah, I just think when you think about your own life, of what makes your own work experience, like, you'd want to work with people who are healthier. You want to work with people who are emotionally intelligent, whether we use that term or not, people who are just, you want to be around. You're like, who doesn't want to be around people like that?
Right.
Yeah. And that shows that those type of teams and people are more successful in producing products and producing their goals, versus just having a bunch of all-star, really smart people, but they don't like each other. They don't know how to resolve conflict. They don't know how to communicate with each other. They don't do as well. So.
Well, and listening to you talk, I'm thinking about, it must enhance other aspects of your life as well. If you're strong in the emotional intelligence area, that would build confidence, I would imagine. And build confidence in your team members around you, knowing that you've got it together. And so where do we learn these skills? Are these, can you read a book and be emotionally intelligent right, just by reading a book, or is it something that you find a mentor for, or is it a combination?
Right. No, I think that's the kind of the big question, right? Like, okay, and I think that's one of the things that the Time conference, I was presenting an overview of emotional intelligence, but again, I'm just like, it's not enough just to know, right? I guess knowing is half the battle, kind of. Right. Like, what do you do with it, right? And I think we live in a society that more and more is like knowledge. Everyone assumes if you know more, then you'll be successful, but it's, again, with the application of knowledge,
right.
And so, yeah, I think you just hit the nail on the head. Because a book can help, right? Podcasts or hearing about this can help, but that's not enough, right? You can listen to a lot of stuff on healthy eating, or exercise.
But you've got to apply it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I can read like the best plan of how to like lose weight, but if you don't do it, what's the point? And so that's why I think, like as you said about relationships, whether it's a mentor or friendships or families or coworkers that you can lean on. I said in the Time conference to look at those relationships that you see emotional intelligence, and to invite them into your life to help you, right? And that's a hard thing. More and more, I realize people don't want to ask for help. It's really, really hard. I do a lot of relationship counseling, marriage counseling, and I really believe the number one reason why marriages fail is because people don't want to ask for help until it's too late, and I think that's the case not just for marriage, but individuals, we want to figure it out on our own. And I think with emotional intelligence, we really need help, right? Like, just like, I struggled with weight for most of my life. Like, I can read a lot, and I have read a lot, but I really need help, and I actually just hired like a coach to help me, a physical fitness coach, because I need some coaching, I need some encouragement. And I think that is really the place to start, to be like, hey, like, who can I reach out to that I look up to, who has some good emotional intelligence? Again, no one's perfect, but let's say there's a chief. Let's say there's a coworker that is just really self-aware, and to start asking those questions and inviting that help. Again, I think a book is really helpful. Like the basic book I shared there is called Emotional Intelligence 2.0. Yep. But yeah, I really do think it's about inviting more relationships and people to look at you and being willing to listen. That's the hard part. Like, no one wants to hear like, hey, like, Ryan, like, sometimes you're socially unaware that like you talk too long, like, oh, it's like no one wants to hear that, and so, but that's
except
feedback.
Our audience.
Well, we'll see afterwards, but yeah, just that's like that kind of feedback is really helpful and hard though to ask for. And so I do think inviting various levels of relationships. Again, I think the easiest thing would be to get a coach. Again, the Air Force. I think more the DoD is they have these certified coaches actually.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, and just like emotional intelligence is becoming a bigger deal in the military, coaching is becoming a bigger deal in the military. Again, very successful in the business world. Every CEO has an executive coach and all that stuff, and we're starting to finally do that in the military. And so I would say, if you're listening and you're really interested, there's, again, just to Google Air Force certified coaches or DoD certified coaches, and it's free for military members, and just meet with someone and just say, like, hey, I want to be more emotionally intelligent. And they're not going to be experts. They're there more to coach you and help you think through how you can do that. So I would say that's actually probably the best first next step to do that. And I meet with a coach as well. I meet with this woman out in Ohio every other week to help me with different personal, professional issues. So again, I think it's all about just getting and asking for help.
Right. Yeah. And in terms of mentorship, nothing says you can't have more than one mentor.
Oh, that's right.
And you have a mentor for different aspects of your life and your professional career. And if you find somebody who fits the bill for emotional intelligence, hitch your wagon onto them.
Oh, totally. And it's hard to find some people because, all of us grew up in families, and some grew up in really tough families, and some grew up in some more loving families, but not perfect. And again, we learn our emotional intelligence habits at a young age, and for most people, they need to unlearn some of those things.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Sure, you kind of unload some of the baggage.
Oh yeah, totally. That's where I think counseling helps too. We didn't say that, but I think counseling is important. Counseling is looking at the past and how that influences you now. Coaching is more about looking at the future and where you want to go. I think both are important. I just met with an airman yesterday, and we were talking about that, and he realized, listening to a lot of these podcasts about stoicism stuff, like these guys have thankfully influenced him to be realized, hey, like I need to deal with this trauma stuff. I need to deal with the past to be a better human being, to be more successful, and I'm glad that he said that, and realizing that. And I hope more people do as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Great. Okay, so we've talked about mentorship and feedback and that type of thing. During your presentation, you speak of the 360 interview. What can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so this is another tool, again, within the bigger realm of emotional intelligence. And, it's, again, very prevalent in the business world. It's somewhat required, a lot of Fortune 500 companies, because the main point of it's a developmental tool to bring self-awareness and social awareness. And so how I got it done when I was a pastor at a church, again, our staff was very small, so it's supposed to be anonymous, so I kind of knew, you kind of know who's going to respond. But the idea is you create a survey, usually online, and it covers different categories, my communication skills or personality or team skills, whatever, and a bunch of questions within those domains. And this survey is sent to 3 groups of people. The first is your supervisor, if there's one or more, and they kind of rate you, from a 1 to 5 or 1 to 7 scale with some comments. Then it's sent to your peers, and then they input how they feel and think about you. And then it's sent to your supervisees, the people that you lead and manage. And from those 3 groups of people, you get a full 360 view of how people experience you, at least in the workplace, And it can be really encouraging because you're realizing, oh, there's a lot of good things I'm doing, things that I'm trying to do. People get it. But it also brings really to reality the things that you hope people didn't realize about you, which is your weaknesses and your insecurities that, either you realize from people's comments, they know those things, which are like, kind of embarrassing, or you get from the feedback things that you didn't realize that you never heard before that you need to work on. And so that's why it can be somewhat of a punch in the stomach, because it kind of hits your ego. And that's why a lot of people don't want to do 360s. They don't want to get that kind of honest feedback, but it's really helpful, and I would also say empowering, especially to your supervisees who've never had a voice. Especially in the military, everything's top down. We don't really know exactly how our peers feel about us, and oftentimes we don't know how our supervisees feel about us. So a 360 allows that type of feedback, and in the hopes from that awareness, you can start making changes in how you interact with people, right? So the 360 is a valuable tool. It was helpful for me. Like, for example, someone pointed out, that I can be flaky, you know, and I knew I do that, but I didn't want other people to know that.
Oh, sure.
But they did. And I was like, okay, like I really need to work on being a man of my word and saying, hey, I'll be here, or I'll do this, and to do it. And so it leads to hopefully self-correction, you know.
Sure.
So yeah, the 360 is really helpful. We're starting to do it at the 102nd ISR group. But I really hope it's done more throughout the whole 102nd Intelligence Wing, the Mass Guard, because I think it'll make only better leaders, right? Like, I can't imagine how this would hurt. I mean, it hurt your ego, but it'll only make you better in terms of realizing, hey, this is how people are experiencing you as a person, as a leader, and, you know, because we don't want toxic leaders, right? We don't want unhealthy leaders. You know, that the number one reason people leave their jobs is not because of money, it's because their bosses are terrible, you know, and we already have a retention issue.
I would imagine that nobody takes a position of leadership with the intention of being toxic.
Right.
You know, that's something that just happens, and it happens when, you know, you're not keeping your foot on the gas in terms of being a good leader, you know, bad habits and things that you maybe don't see. Like you mentioned, you know, this 360 interview, you know, it could allude to things, or it could, you know, uncover things that you didn't realize about yourself that you do.
Yeah. Well, one of the interesting things in this initial pilot we just finished in the past month is that, and unsurprising to me, that people also self-rate themselves. I should have said that. You know, they also take their own assessment. And their supervisor ratings are always the same or higher than their own rating, but the supervisees always rate them lower than they think they are, you know, most often, not always, right? And it definitely, the people who get that, like, you know, it's kind of like a wake-up call, like, hey, like, you're doing great, and you can say, like, oh, everyone just doesn't like me because I'm the leader, I'm the boss. No one likes the boss, but, you know, the question is, like, is this something you need to really consider, that something you're doing? Again, the comments flesh out more of what he or she is doing, but you're right. No one comes in thinking they're a bad leader, right? But I realize one of the reasons that why I really want to try to advance emotional intelligence and the 360 idea to the mid-level leader, whether tech sergeant up or lieutenant and up, is because a lot of these leadership habits are, you know, it's formed early on, you know,
right? Even before the military experience starts.
Oh, totally.
Right?
And they see it from older leaders, you know, and again, that's a crapshoot whether they're good or bad, you know. And so, yeah, I think that's why we need to work on now developing better leaders for the future. So
would you say, would it be better for someone to just voluntarily go, you know, I'm going to find one of these 360 interviews and run it on myself? Or do you think it would be helpful for a unit to maybe implement, or a section implement? Would it be, I mean, I'm thinking in terms of some people may be prepared for this and some people might not be.
Right.
You know, do you want people to kind of come in and do it themselves because that would represent their maybe their ego is strong enough to handle the result?
Right. No, that's true. I mean, right now at the 102nd ISR group, it's all voluntary, you know. Yeah. I think later on it will be a part of people's development. Sure. And again, still voluntary. I would say that there are ways to do it individually, you know, where you have to maybe reach out to an organization to help you do that. Again, I think the key thing is through the unit, right? Sure. And that's why I think I'd love to see more chaplains and chaplain corps enlisted members kind of lead this initiative, because everyone's already busy. The nice thing about being a chaplain is that there's a lot of freedom, you know, to do and try new things, especially thankfully at the 102nd. And so I think I'd love to see more at the unit, because, you know, you feel, because it is a scary thing to put yourself out there and have people kind of analyze you, right?
Right.
But if we can reduce some of that fear by doing something in-house, let's say you do one, right? And I'm meeting with you and we're looking through your results together, you know, I think you'll feel a little more comfortable versus, you know, some random person you don't know. Right. Maybe. Right. But yeah, I think it'd be cool to see more units do that. That's why I really want to pilot it and make it successful at the 102nd group, and that the data and the results are good, to kind of bring it out to the whole intelligence wing, you know. So it will take time. I don't know if there are other initiatives like this throughout the whole Guard or even the active duty world, or even at NGB, but I just feel like I can't see why it would be a bad thing, right? So,
well, this could be a benchmark for the Air National Guard. Who knows?
yeah, maybe, you know.
Your phone might start ringing off the hook after
this maybe, you know.
podcast airs.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the fascinating things I was sharing with at the time conference, right? And as you as a high enlisted, you know, leader back in the day, and now kind of leading the PA office, like, you know, the more you're supervising and leading people, I really truly believe becomes depending on your industry and AFSC, it becomes less about your knowledge base, but more about who you are and how you lead and how you take care of people and how you influence people, right? And a lot of that comes from who you are,
right?
And a lot of people don't want to deal with that because it's like too soft, right? It's not like as concrete. But that's why I think I like to frame a lot of these conversations around human improvement, human performance skills improvement, you know. And I think that's what I'm hoping to see more of in our airmen and in our leaders, right? Because again, I mean, the people who come to me, most of them are complaining about mid-level leadership, you know, which makes sense because they're learning how to be leaders, right?
Right.
My question is, how do we make them better so that as a tech or as a master or as a first lieutenant, so that when they become, you know, higher up, you know, that they are actually, you know, even better than, you know.
Train them how to swim before they jump in the pool.
Oh, totally, you know. And I think the time conference is one of the ways that happens. But yeah, as I look across the military, it's just not as prevalent, and I think we can do more and not have to spend as much money as everyone thinks we need to, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
So if the 360 interview is looking internally and examining your own ego and your skill set in the emotional intelligence world, let me ask you, how has emotional intelligence affected you in your personal life and professional life?
Yeah, you know, again, I think that's one of the interesting things about, for example, one of the domains of self-awareness, right? There was a study done at Harvard Business School around just self-awareness. And when you ask this group of people, or I think ask a group of people in the study, how many people think they're self-aware, 95% said I'm self-aware, right? But when you start doing the questions and data collection and analyzing, one of the ways they do it is, for example, let's say, okay, let's test your self-awareness, Tim. We'd send you a survey, right? But then we'd say, give us 4 more names, and we'll send it to them and see what they think about your self-awareness, right? And so obviously, if there's a mismatch, you know, then you're not as self-aware as you think you are.
Right.
So anyway, 95% of people say they are self-aware. The result of this survey was that only 15% of people were truly self-aware, right? And so again, this is a kind of funny idea that we always think we're more than we actually are. And I think this area in emotional intelligence is one of them, you know. And I would probably be one of those people too, being like, yeah, I'm totally emotionally intelligent, you know, or at least I'm more emotionally intelligent than that person, right?
Right.
I see this all the time. And I think, like, for me, like, you know, I feel like pretty confident, you know, in terms of my ability to connect with people, you know, I enjoy that. But yeah, when I did the 360, when this past year, as I got trained in emotional intelligence, we had to do emotional intelligence assessment. My scores, you know, were kind of like average, to be honest, you know, and I was like, oh wow, like there's still a lot of ways I need to grow. For example, one of the areas is around self-management, right? Like, and this seems like such a simple idea, but yeah, like I don't really sleep on time, you know, like I always stay up later than I should, and then I don't get a full night's sleep, and you know, that seems like everyone's story, but I just realized, like, that's like emotional, it's under the umbrella of emotional intelligence. Like, if I know that I'm happier and healthier and I actually lose weight better if I sleep, but I'm not doing that and I wake up groggy and I'm not changing that, it's like, okay, like there's a mismatch from, again, what I want from what I'm doing, and to change it is actually quite easy, but I haven't done it, you know? One more better example actually is relationship management with my wife, right? Like, I think marriage, but also just deep friendships and deep family, like they reveal, again, that's why we need people in our lives. They reveal the places we need to grow. And my wife has done that for me, an incredible gift of showing how terrible I can be. So, and so, you know, I realize, you know, how reactive I can be with my wife when she wants me to clean, you know. I use this example at the conference, but I don't really like cleaning at all. I feel like I'm better than most, better than average for guys. But again, my wife has very high high standards of organization and cleanliness, and yeah, she would ask me to clean up, and and when she would, I just react really like nasty sometimes, just like leave me alone, you know, like I'm watching football, like I don't, in ways that like made no sense, right? You're just like, and sometimes there's things that trigger us, right? So my wife was triggering me, and I was reacting so negatively, even hurtfully to her. And I had to do some self-awareness, some processing, some self-talk, some journaling. Okay, why am I reacting in such a crazy way to my wife when she wants me to clean? Well, one part is because she's asking me at the wrong time. I can tell her that. I don't. I just yell at her. And so the emotional intelligence and practicing some of these skills helped me realize, like, what I hear from my wife isn't, I need your help to clean. What I hear from my wife is, you're not man enough. You're not a good husband. And she's not actually saying that, but for some reason, again, from my past, things I need to deal in counseling, like, I'm hearing that, right?
It's your frame of reference.
Yeah. And if I don't deal with that, right? I believe in this phrase, if you don't deal with pain and trauma, if you don't transform your pain and trauma, it just gets transferred, right? And in that example, I was transferring it to my wife, that she was just like my dad, actually saying, hey, you're not good enough. You need to study harder. You're too chubby, things like that. Yeah. And my wife wasn't having that heart behind her, what she was asking me to do. So emotional intelligence fleshed out a lot of the deeper layers of what was going on. Because ultimately, I want to have a happy relationship with my wife, like, I want to help her clean. I want her to have, I want us to have joy, right? So the thing that I want, I can keep doing what I'm doing, and just yell at her or be mad at her when she asks me to clean. But if I want her to be happy, if I want me to be happy, why? The question is, how do we do that? And I think through the tools of emotional intelligence, I realized, okay, these are the things I need to work on, and realize what I hear from her isn't true, right? And so that's one example. So
that's great. Well, not great for yeah.
Well, it's great because it made me a better husband, right?
Right. Ultimately, it's a skill added.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, that's
100%. So
great anecdote. Thank you. So winding down, is there anything that we've left on the table that you want to talk about? Anything we didn't cover?
I mean, I think the thing I leave is just kind of a word of encouragement, for those who are listening, that this is a tough topic, that, there's a reason why there's more mental health struggles in our culture, more relationships are breaking down, the loss of family, the loss of, the less and less people are in relationships, right?
Connectedness.
We're not part of religious groups, churches. We're not part of any bowling clubs, softball clubs as much.
But we're right on that Facebook group that's all spewing all that negativity, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's why I got Facebook. So, this is really hard stuff, I think, again, one of the interesting data points about emotional intelligence is in the younger generations, the IQs have gone up. Again, that's formed at a very young age. They've gone up 25 points, but the emotional intelligence of our young people has gone down. And a lot of that's directly correlated to the loss of connection and how to interact with people. And so I guess my encouragement to those who are listening, whether you're old or young, right, is that this is hard. But the hardest part is just taking that first step to get help, So whether it's reaching out to a chaplain, to a trusted friend, to someone that you look up to, or even just reaching out to a coach or counselor, like that step of faith is somewhat a huge step in success. I want to encourage that all of you are listening, that it's worth it, It's worth it to take that step. And even though it's a little scary, it will create a better life for you. And that's my hope and prayer for everyone listening, everyone at the 102nd, to really fulfill of who they truly are, their joy, their happiness, their love. And but again, it can be scary to change things up, but I do think, and I hope from our talk, that people realize that this is worth it. And it can truly profoundly change everything.
And you can't just go through the motions. You've got to let down the shields and absorb this information. Be ready to learn, and ready to learn a little bit about yourself that maybe you won't be very happy with initially, but you gotta allow that plant to grow.
Oh, 100%. 100%. So.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for your time. I appreciate it. Is there anything else you want to throw at?
No, I just appreciate this time.
Could you, there was a book that you had mentioned on emotional intelligence. I
think I
just want to reiterate that.
Next Step, again, a great book. That's really fundamental, very short, small book called Emotional Intelligence, 2.0 by Bradbury. Again, it's on Amazon or wherever you need to find, or in the library, or
Great.
Hoopla, whatever. But that's a good intro to this stuff. Again, you can probably listen to other podcasts to kind of start learning about this stuff. But again, as we just said, learning is part of it, but then applying it, getting help is actually going to be the most transformative part. So
fantastic.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for coming on.